There's a lot I want to cover in this video, and a lot of it is basic groundwork. I'd like to discuss a stage in Super Mario World through the lens of structuralism. To get there, I want to introduce Saussure, an important guy to structuralism, and I want to go over framing. In short, I've got a big build-up with a small payoff. Along the way, we'll meet friends and foes alike, and if we're lucky, we'll have a good time too. So anyway, I was playing Super Mario World the other day with my good friend Saussure. Saussure. And he says to me,
Language is a system of interdependent terms in which the value of each term results solely from the simultaneous presence of others, as in the diagram.
What does that mean?
We only know what words mean because we know what other words mean. We understand words because we understand the relationships they have with other words.
So it's like, when I say the word cat, you know what I mean because a cat isn't a tree and it isn't a dog.
More or less. We only understand words because they have been used in context with other words. Context is everything.
Your turn. So, what's that got to do with Super Mario World?
We perceive these platforms in a certain way because they are placed in relation to other platforms. In other words, the platforms and enemies in a stage are all placed in context to one another. The relation of these elements influences how we perceive a stage.
So, as single solitary elements, these platforms mean nothing. But, because these platforms are placed together in a single stage, they come to have significance? No?
I mean, yes. Because those platforms were placed together in a single stage, they had significance. In addition, their significance is determined by the relationship they have with each other.
Looks like it's my turn. Think of it this way. A single stage element means nothing. If I just say the word cat, that means nothing. You know what a cat is, but I'm not really saying anything, am I? However, the sentence "the cat kicked the dog" has meaning. That's because the word cat works in relation to the words kicked and dog. Also, it has a different meaning than the sentence "the dog kicked the cat." In each sentence, the word cat relates to the word kicked and the word dog differently. This concept is called, drumroll please, structuralism. You should note that Saussure is probably writhing in his grave right now. This isn't a direct portrayal of his ideas. Instead, it's a very basic introduction to structuralism. Anyway, now that I'm done insulting your intelligence, let's consider what structuralism means for level design. Framing might be the most obvious place to look. A frame is part of an artwork, but it's not the main part. A frame sets up the heart of an artwork. Think of Fred Savage in The Princess Bride. His story was a frame. He was at the beginning and the end of the movie, and his story set up the main action. Fred Savage was sick, so his grandfather told him a story, and the grandfather's story was the main action of the movie. In that case, we understand the grandfather's story in the context of bedridden Fred Savage. Okay, I guess I wasn't done insulting your intelligence. At any rate, Super Mario World employs framing. Let's take a look at Yoshi's Island 3. The stage, not the game. Yoshi's Island 3 opens with this series of platforms. Mario enters the stage down here. Before making any horizontal progress in the stage, he's got to get to the top. This isn't required by the stage design. The programmers could have placed Mario's entrance at the top. No, the programmers chose to make Mario jump from the bottom to the top. For most of the stage, Mario stays near the top of the screen. Then, over here, at the end of the stage, Mario descends. Looks like we got our frame then. The main action of the stage is near the top, and the stage is bookended by low parts. Something here strikes me as an obvious observation, but not the only potential observation. It feels like Mario is going over a mountain. He starts at the bottom, climbs up, and then goes down on the other side. But that's not all. Mario stays near the top of the screen for most of the stage, not all. What's he doing near the bottom here? Well, note that this platform contains a midway tape. He goes down to break the tape, then back up afterwards. This takes advantage of the framing device employed at the beginning and the end of the stage. When Mario goes down before the midway tape, it's the end of the first half. When Mario goes up after the midway tape, it's the beginning of the second half. The midway tape, then, cuts the stage in two distinct halves. Why are both halves in the same stage? Because they share the same themes. The framing device from the first half is reused in the second half, and many of the elements of the first half are repeated in the second. There are tall, thin platforms bridged by three kinds of floating platforms, the same three kinds of floating platforms you see in the first half of the stage. The second half of the stage provides further exploration of the themes established in the first half. So, okay, I talk about themes, but what are they? It seems to me that the most notable theme here is the contrast between user-dependent and user-independent platforms. User-dependent platforms depend on the user for how they function, or, at the very least, the user can modify how they function. User-independent elements will always do the same thing, no matter what the user does. The yellow accordion blocks and the checkered platforms are user-independent. The yellow blocks expand and contract regardless of Mario, and the checkered platforms move back and forth whether or not Mario is present. And, of course, the brown landmasses are user-independent. These mountains aren't moving anytime soon. The brown rotating platforms are user-dependent. They depend on the user to function. They sway under Mario's weight. Without Mario, they do nothing. The quality of their performance is also dependent on Mario. If Mario jumps off, they stop swinging, and if he stays on, his weight provides momentum. The yellow exclamation blocks demonstrate another sort of user dependence. On one hand, Mario can't affect their position at all. They are unmoving. However, their very presence is dependent on whether or not Mario has completed the yellow switch palace. Consider how the elements of this stage are understood in the context of one another. One lone element is meaningless. Its purpose is unclear. Two elements establish a theme. The connection between these two elements provides a basis of meaning. Three elements satisfy a theme. While two elements may establish a theme, the presence of three elements ensures that the player understands the theme. This concept works well with framing. With three elements, you've got a first, you've got a last, and you've got a middle. This is also why Mario bosses commonly go down with 3 hits. And, hey, guess what? The Bowser fight is a string of 3 sessions requiring 2 hits each. Think of it like a line. One lone point could be on an infinite amount of lines. No theme is established. 2 points define a line, but that's the bare minimum. A theme is tentatively established. With the third point, you know if you've got the right line or not. If the third point is on the same line that the first 2 points defined, then you're good. If the third point is not on that line, something is up. 3 points on the same line provide a sense of assurance. I know the question you're all asking. How can we see this in Yoshi's Island 3? Well, in the first half of the stage, 3 of the bottomless pits are bridged by brown rotating platforms. The first pit, the third pit, and the 5th pit have them. Note that the 5th pit is the last pit of the first half of the stage, and it contains not 1, but 2 rotating platforms. In Super Mario World, difficulty often reaches a crescendo right at the end of a segment. The most difficult jump of a stage is often at its end. So, the stage makes players familiar with the mechanics of the brown rotating platform. That's not all that's going on, though. The 2nd pit is bridged by 2 accordion blocks, and the 4th pit is bridged by 2 checkered platforms. The stage design seems to consider 2 user-independent platforms as one unit, perhaps because their mechanics are simpler than the user-dependent platforms. With simpler mechanics, there's a greater need to establish just what they mean for the player. By interacting together, they stress the player to learn them more. It's hard to jump from one moving platform to another moving platform, since the timing for both needs to coincide. By comparison, jumping from a moving platform to an unmoving platform, the player only needs to worry about the timing of one platform. Anyway, these user-independent platforms serve as accents to the user-dependent ones. There is an emphasis on interacting with brown rotating platforms. They begin the segment, they end the segment, and they're in the middle of the segment. By breaking up this string of rotating platforms, the rotating platforms themselves are better understood. You know what a cat is because it's not a dog and it's not a tree. The more things you see, the better you know what a cat is and what a cat isn't. This stage provides 2 different kinds of user-independent platforms in order to provide a greater diversity of opposition to the rotating platforms. Also, because no user-independent platform is as prevalent as the rotating platform, they don't steal the show. In this way, the platforms work in relation to one another in one big structure. Also, user-independent platforms take the player up, while user-dependent platforms take the player down. I'm not sure of the significance of this, but at the very least, it makes the brown rotating platforms easier to use. They take the player down with no guarantee of coming back up. I gotta be honest with you. No matter what you think of my grasp on the first half of the stage, my grasp on the second half is worse. I don't have any cohesive theory to bring it all together. The platforms seem much more erratically placed than in the first half. However, there are some significant things I can point out. I'll just list them off. It starts with a user-independent platform. The second and third pits mix user-dependent and user-independent platforms. The second pit contains 6 accordion blocks in an unbroken series. In other words, it contains 3 sets of 2. Look at that last pit. The vertical distance between these 2 platforms is smaller than the vertical distance between the 2 platforms at the end of the first half. The larger the vertical distance, the easier the jump. Let's look at the end of the first half. If Mario goes down this far, it's still easy to jump to the next platform. Now let's go to the end of the second half. If Mario does the same here, the jump will be much harder. In short, Yoshi's Island 3 uses the brown rotating platforms in meaningful juxtaposition to the yellow accordion blocks and checkered platforms. It employs a framing device to make the player feel high above the ground. Here, the 3 different types of moving platforms teeter, daring players to cross from one precipice to the next. In other words, the sense of height lends a sense of importance to the moving platforms. The stage is dominated by brown rotating platforms, and it seems to sway under the player's feet. These moments feel more tense when placed between a variety of more stable moving platforms, namely, the accordion blocks and checkered platforms. The point is, level designers are architects. Think of Gothic cathedrals. Old Sammy Taylor Coleridge once said that the principle of the Gothic architecture is infinity made imaginable. This is because of its structure. Gothic cathedrals are tall and use buttresses to taper upwards and draw the eye upwards, towards heaven. The stained glass windows are a key part of the eye's journey to heaven. They depict how others have also made the journey to heaven. We should demand stages that are so meaningfully designed. I didn't really write any jokes to finish with. Yeah.